whose education is not even worth to be called education, because the whole thing is geared towards preparing them to be servants of the whites, only to be useful as economic tools in the system. Nothing else, not to develop them as individuals, as human beings, or to develop their potentials, not at all. But to prepare them to be servants of the white colonial system.
In the job classifications, would there be any minors who are white or colored? Or in the services in the section B, I mean classification B, physically speaking, are all the minors black, et cetera, et cetera? You follow what I'm getting at?
Yeah. Well, in that particular, the white minors do not fall in that. The white minors will fall in the generally accepted categories of pay ranges. Know that if you are an engineer, you're an engineer. If you are a section boss, you are a section boss. So you receive what the section boss is supposed to receive. But they are not classified as the blacks for the purpose because of their physical structure or something like that. They are classified according to their either experience, qualification, or something like that. The type of job they can do, not because of their physical characteristics.
Minors who are there any white minors who go down into the
Yes,
mines?
there are mostly the section bosses and the supervisors, those who do the supervising job.
Yes. Just a few questions. I'm sure there are quite a few that have been stimulated by the discussion, but you said that the workers can't live on these wages. How are the wages supplemented if they can't live on the wages they earn in the mines?
You see, what you have is that while they are under the mines employment, they are given that inferior food while they are there. And their salary is cut to meet those supplies, those food supplies. Now, on the level of the wage they receive, if they have to go back to their rural areas, they can't live on those because it's not enough, it's not simple enough. What you do then is that you have a field where you plow in your own reserve and you grow your own food there according to the traditional methods or what have you. You got your cattle there, your goats or what have you, on which you can get milk and all these type of things. So in fact what you have are peasant workers. They cultivate and sometimes they go to sell their labor to supplement their existence. Because if they don't go to sell their labor, then they can't be able to pay the taxes or levies, the annual levies which is required from them. You see? If they can't cultivate, they won't be able to live because they can't live on the wages they receive. So you've got that situation.
The labor contract confines them to the mine for 12 months, 18 months, as I understand you to say.
Yep.
Then how are they free to return to the rural areas to plant crops and tend their plots and so on?
What you have is that while they are in the mines, at the mines or what in the white employment, their families are still there. Their families are still there. What they do is they can use part of what they receive to buy little things like soaps, like sugar. You send to the rural areas. Then you can use that. Your wife can use that to hire labor. To anybody wants soap, he can come there and work a certain area there. Then give him soap or a cup of sugar or something like that.
Okay, I have just one other question, a final question. So, the contracts themselves, their terms for these contracts. What if there are violations? If the worker feels a violation of his own contract, is there any sort of appeal or grievance procedure available to him?
if he feels that it's violated by whom?
By his employer,
By the employer.
by the mining company.
He has no recourse to anything. He can't do anything. He has no recourse to anything. He can't do anything. He either accepts it or he perhaps decides to rebel against the working condition and he's deported back to his rural area.
So it is not a contract, in other words, it's just
Well, it's not a contract in the sense you understand the contract is an agreement between the two. It's not like that. It's not like that at all.
you see?
Mr. Angola, like, what is the yearly tax levy on workers? How much is it?
Well, it because it follows age. If you're about 16, 18, under 20, then you are likely to pay $10 per year. If you are above that, depending also a little upon the property you have, you are likely to pay $30 or $40 per year. That is in the reserves, in the rural areas. But in towns it's something different because there we have many, those who live in towns, those who are residents of towns, they got different other taxes to pay. Water, electricity, and all these things are collected every month.
What metals come from the Sumed mine?
You got various type of metals, but the main one is copper.
And you said that, a final question, that people in the compounds were only trained in first aid, and mining is very dangerous. So if, in fact, a worker is seriously injured and there is no hospital close by, what happens?
What happens is that they give you first aid. But if they see that you are no more useful, they send you back to your reserve where you came from. If you are lucky enough in the reserve, because usually you got, these missionary hospitals, then you can go to the missionary hospital and perhaps get here. I have witness to that. I've seen many people coming out from the mines, railways who have been injured and sent back to their own rural areas, and some of them get paralyzed for good because of lack of medical care. Simple like that.
And do many of them die on the way?
Men do die, yes. But as I said earlier, no records are really kept or at least made available to anybody.
Mr. Angola, is the requirement that laborers work 18 months at a time away from their families just a convenience for purposes of labor, or is that a method of keeping the African birth rate down as well?
I think it's for the labor convenience because they can't afford to go, transporting people every time and then from the rural areas because of the transport costs. They want to avoid that. They want to have somehow a stable labor force which goes on. But the side effect of birth rate, of course, comes in also. And there are many other side effects to that. That's one of them.
Right. Mr. Angola, did you ever work in the mine yourself or know personally some people who worked in the mines?
I have known my own relatives, cousins, brothers working in the mines, but I never worked in the mine myself.
What were the conditions, the work conditions, during the day when you're working in the mine? And were the supervisors nice to the workers, or did they have a lot of breaks for lunch and rest breaks? What kind of work did people do? What kind of work do people do in the mine? And for example, what are the relations like between the supervisors and the workers during the workday?
Well, the whole apartheid system does not allow interaction between the whites and the blacks. Usually, the white is your boss. You are there to do job. He stands there and he tells you, do this, take a hammer and hit this rock, or drill this hole here, or something like that. His job there is to give you instruction to do the job and to produce for the benefit and the profits of the owners of the company. What you do receive something like it's a soup, while you are working there in terms of food. In between the hours, you receive a bowl of soup. You eat that. That is it. Then you have to continue with your work until you're out of there.
You say you work a 12-hour day. How long are the breaks between work hours?
I'm not quite sure how long they are, but they are not many.
Well, one more question. In the mines here in the United States, like the coal mines, for example, a lot of the workers, after they've worked in the mines for a number of years, they found that they have problems either with their lungs or other physical ailments. Have you known people who've worked in the mines who have had after effects, physical after effects from the work that they've done there? And if so, what kind of problems might they have had?
I have known several. TB in particular is a chronic among the Namibian mine workers in Namibia. And in the process, they have taken that to the rural areas, and I remember at a certain time there was an outbreak of TB. They tried to come and vaccinate people and what to do, what not, examine them and try to determine who has got TB. So you got all these type of, some of them get blind at a very young age, say 40, 45, because of the bad lighting system in the mines there where they have been working. Some of them, they get deaf because of the noise in the mines there. So you've got all these physical effects upon the workers. But, well, in that system, you are not really a worker in the sense we use the word usually. You are just an object of labor like any other machine. A machine is even better off because it breaks down. If it breaks down, they have to attend to it. But you as a human being, you want money to support yourself sometimes. Even if you feel that you are not quite well, you go there and you do the job. You have to do the job.
Mr. Angola, you said rather that you work a 12-hour day in the mines. How many meals do you have within that 12-hour day?
Before you go into the shop, before you go there, you have to have the main meal. That is pap and a bit of vegetables, sugar, what have you. Before you go there.
And what was that you said about the meal, that main meal?
That's pap. It's called pap. It's made out of
meal.
Yeah, meal and all that stuff. It's like you take farina. You got farina here. If you boil water and put farina in the water and you stir, then you get pap. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then sometimes you got vegetables to eat that pap with. Sometimes you got only sugar to put on that pap. You see? So you got that. Then you go in the mine. In between the hours, then you got a bowl of soup. You see? Then until when you come out, then you have to have your meal before you go to rest.
I was asking that question because I wanted to know, from what I had heard you testify prior, it didn't seem as if the people could be very healthy with the type of food. It doesn't seem as if they're getting the proper nutrients.
They are not at all. I think if you were here when the film was shown, this was clearly stated in that film.
I have a couple of questions about your recommendation about finding AMAX an outlaw. I'd like to know your comments on some liberal politicians in this country have suggested that it would be a good thing for the Southern African peoples if more United States corporations were to, set up shop in Namibia and Southern Africa, that would help with liberal policies to help the situation there. What are your comments on that?
The problem with your politicians is that they are there to protect the multinational companies. Sometimes they are part and parcel of them. And it's difficult to work against our own interests. They don't know how we feel ourselves about these companies because they have been never in our type of situation. And for that matter, they don't care to consult us. Even if they consult us, they don't care to take what we say into serious consideration. But I'm quite sure if I find a company today and come here in the United States and start mining somewhere without getting the permission of this government, the government will be the first to organize the law enforcement machinery to evict me from that particular land. I know that if I come here to the United States and start employing the Americans, segregating them, paying them starvation wages, keeping them away from their families, these governments will be the first to organize even an army to fight me.
The other question is about SWAPO. You mentioned that because unions were not allowed, that SWAPO took the form of a political party that is engaged in armed struggle against the government. I would like to know a little bit more about. I understand that that's the solution that you espouse for the people in Namibia, as opposed to this liberal solution. Could you tell us a little bit more about the armed struggle side of SWAPO?
Well, we regard that to be one of the means towards the solution. SWAPO is not a military organization, it's a political party. It uses various other methods such as mobilization of the international support, mobilization at home to make people aware of their conditions, and to make them a solid body to fight against the illegal occupying regime. But because of many years of frustration of the Namibian people, the Namibian question is a very interesting one, and I know that Mrs. Landis, who is going to tell you about the international character of that question, will make you realize that we have been even more unnaturally patient against our own exploitation and suppression. Otherwise, we were supposed to start a long time ago the armed struggle. But we have been patient enough, and we only started in 1966.
Oh, one more question.
What kind of repression is SWAPO and the sympathizers of SWAPO among the people subject to? What kind of harassment?
All sorts of things we can think of. When we started the armed struggle, in that very year, our political leaders and some military cadres were arrested. South Africa rushed to the parliament and enacted the so-called Anti-Terrorism Act. That is a law which has got far-reaching tentacles, touching all aspects of what they consider to be subversion. The maximum penalty in that law is death sentence. The minimum is 5 years. Some of our people have received life sentences, and they are still serving those life sentences in South African jails. Some have received 20 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and 2 of our colleagues were sentenced to death. But thanks to international solidarity and some technical shortcomings within when they were being tried, later on they were released because of these technicalities and also because of the pressure from outside. So anything can really happen to you. What appears now to happen is that if you are arrested and they suspect you to be connected in one way or another with the armed struggle or with SWAPO. What they like to do is either to keep you indefinitely in the prison without telling anybody that you are there, or even to kill you or to do whatever they want to do with you without telling anybody. Many people have just vanished. Sometimes when they know that these people are known by other people, they will say, oh, perhaps they ran away to the African independent countries. But they're not there. So anything can really happen to you.
I think one final thing has to be cleared up. Do you think the people that are interested in reform of the company, what state does the company have to be in to be legal to the people who work and live in that area?
Well, in the first place, those companies are operating there illegally. Because South Africa is, we will be told South Africa is there illegally and they are operating under those laws. All companies have been requested to observe the decisions of the United Nations, which is the direct responsibility of the country. What they were supposed to do is to withdraw, because they are acting there illegally. You see? That's why we consider them to be outlaws, because they are not observing the international laws. You will hear more from that, about that from Mrs. Lance, I suppose.
Thank you.
By the way, the grand jurors, of course, these lights are really hot. You know, you can get up and run out and get some refreshment in the middle of things. You're not locked in here or anything. I didn't realize how hot these lights were going to be until I sat back here. The next witness is going to be Milo Ann Heckathorn, and she's with the Bay Area Namibia Action Group from San Francisco. She's been working in Namibia support work for about 2.5 years. They've gathered a great deal of information about the activities of the Tsumeb mine in Namibia, and she's going to present some of that information for us. Did you have a chart you wanted to have put up maybe in front?
I was provided with this chart.
I'm really glad that Milo Ann was on this coast and not in San Francisco, so that she was able to participate with us. And without asking you any questions, I think you have some things that you want to, that you have a prepared presentation that you want to come forward with. You can proceed right ahead with it.
I have a bit of, just to fill in about Tsumeb Corporation itself. The first mine was opened in 1908 by the Germans. The Germans operated it up until World War II, when it was confiscated by the South Africans. But during World War II, as I said, the mine was seized by the South Africans. In 1946, the mine was bought for $4 million by a consortium of corporations from the U.S. and from England. Two of the main owners in this consortium were Amex Corporation, which stands for American Metal Climax, and Newmont Mining Company. The minerals extracted from this mine, as Neha said, copper is the main one, but we also have lead, silver, cadmium, pyrite, germanium, and zinc. And a lot of the latter ones are becoming much more important as processing gets higher and higher. These minerals and this Tsumeb mine account for 80% of the base mineral extraction in Namibia, so you can see its importance to the economy in this respect. Tsumeb itself is also involved in smelting and refining, primarily in lead refining at the mine itself. I have a map which we can circulate to the grand jury to see exactly where Tsumeb is. It's up in the northeastern area of the country, just below Ovambaland. I think that it's important to see that the mine has been extremely successful, and there are many reasons why it has been so successful. As I said, it was bought for $4 million. Now, what it was able to do with the minerals that were stocked or stockpiled, so to speak, during the war when the mine was not operated,
They were able to make a $7 million profit, or make $7 million in the first 3 years of operation, which paid back their initial investment right there. I think although the mine and the Tsumeb owners refuse to release specific figures and claim that the South African government does not allow them to, it's been calculated that the value of the installations have grown 20 times the initial investment, so that they're worth around $80 million right now for a $4 million investment. I think much of this phenomenal growth is due to the peculiarities particularly available under apartheid system in South Africa and Namibia. One of the things is one of the reasons for this, I don't know if that was bad, one of the reasons for this is the high rate of extraction that they're able to do. One of the presidents of the owning companies in Tsumeb said that they plan to have the main minerals extracted in 10 to 15 years. This means obviously they are not operating for the benefit of the Namibians. And this is the point that has been made and will be made. It's the corporation primarily involved in getting as high a profit return as it can in the shortest period of time. And it is supported by the South African government in this. I think that it's also important to see with this wealth that is that the company is able to make, where it goes. None of it is left within the company, within the country itself. Aside from the taxes that are paid to the South African government and the wages that are paid, the rest of that in operating costs and in profit go back overseas. And this is primarily to American Metal Climax, Amex Corporation, and Newmont Mining. I think it's important to look at why the corporation's payment of taxes has such an effect on the Namibian economy. These taxes are used only to develop the infrastructure to the white benefit. The money is not used, as Naz pointed out, for education. It's not used for health. It's not used for food. It primarily goes to infrastructure. As you will see in this map, the roads and the railway lines, they all service like Tsumeb and the white areas. I think that, to remember during the Angolan invasion by South Africa, one of the reasons they said it was to protect the Canini Dam that they were jointly involved in. This dam, the grid system for it, the electric grid system, one of the main beneficiaries is the Tsumeb Corporation. It is not going to the irrigation that's needed in the northern areas you will see in the map, which is a reserve area. I think it's also important to note that Tsumeb is the largest single employer of Namibians in the country. Nehas said that the average wage for the blacks is $25. Well, under figures given by Tsumeb Corporation in 1973, they themselves quoted the figures as $54 in cash, $48 in kind. And as this was mentioned, in kind means clothing, minimum health services, bedding, stuff like this. This was about for 4,500 blacks that were employed. The whites, 1,300, their average wage was $685 cash, and plus probably a bit more than $200 in kind. So you see right there these huge discrepancies. But I think this $54 in cash, what's important to see is that you do have some blacks that do earn a very high wage, like they do quote up to $151. So this right there is going to throw off the whole average. It makes it seem much higher. So you see the corporation trying to make it seem better than it is. As was pointed out, this in kind is of absolutely no benefit to the families left back in the reserves. I guess we could look at this right here to see what transnational, such as Tsumeb what a transnational such as Amex and the various companies owning this, how it operates within the country and outside of the country. See, Sumeb in the middle is owned by Amex at 30%, Newmont Mining on the right by 30%, O'Keefe by, well, almost 10%. Now what's interesting about O'Keefe is that O'Keefe is primarily owned by Newmont Mining, so that's another way of hiding. Selection Trust owns 14% of Sumeb. Now this is an English corporation, UK corporation. And then we see SWACO owning part of Sumeb. Now if you look up at who is owning SWACO, you see the famous Anglo-American corporation. And this is Oppenheimer's group. You also see Charter Consolidated owning SWACO, which also owns Sumeb. So 30% there. Now we look at who Amex is working with. Amex over here owns Botswana RSP, which is another mining company in Botswana. Who else owns it? We have Anglo-American also in joint work with them. Then we look down at the Sumeb Exploration Company. Now this is primarily involved in exploration, as it says. They found new copper and lead deposits, fairly significant amounts. Anglo-American owns 25% of Sumeb. We have Sumeb itself owning 75%. Well, we've already seen who owns Sumeb, so we see very definitely the connections of Anglo-American and Sumeb. Now, what is not pointed out in this here is that Standard Oil of California owns 20% of Amex. And then this is going to take us into a whole other area of where the control is coming from to this one corporation. I think it's also important to note that, as I said before, the no money really stays in the country to benefit the country, aside from the infrastructure, which in fact the corporation benefits from. Part of this, the profit, has both been used to build up Amex and Newmont's enterprises on the outside throughout the world with a 20% profit rate. They cannot find this anywhere else.